you very much for being with us, joining this week for our ongoing study of the Bhagavatam. We'll start with the Manglacharan. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskrityam Naram Cheva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Udirayet Ashtaprayeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttam Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Neshtiki Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Hare Krishna again. We are continuing with our discussion on the first canto, sixth chapter, and we will resume from the 14th verse. So this is 1, 6, 14. Parishatrendrayatmam triparito bubukshitah snatva pitva hridayanadya upasrato gata shramaha. Thus traveling, I felt tired both bodily and mentally, and I was both thirsty and hungry. So I took a bath in a river lake and also drank water. By contacting water, I got relief from my exhaustion. So this is Narad's ongoing description to Srila Vyasadeva about what he did in his previous life immediately after two things happened chronologically. One is that the Bhakti Vedantas, they departed after instructing him in the confidential science of Krishna consciousness. Following that, by the turn of destiny or fate, his mother was bitten by a snake and she died. So immediately after that, Narad says that he continued north. So he left his house and he traveled north looking for to make spiritual advancements. So he's describing to Srila Vyasadeva his journey so far. So in the previous set of verses that we did last week, Narad talked about his experiences while traveling. So he went through towns and cities and mines and forests and mountains. And so we had discussed that how Narad was appreciating both natural wonders and man-made wonders. Then in addition to that awe and the sense of wonderment, there was also the sense of danger, because he traveled through thick forests, which he says was frequented by all kinds of dangerous animals. And that is why in this verse, Narad Muni says that I felt tired both bodily and mentally. So the bodily exhaustion was just because of the travel. He was a small child of 5 and he was continuously traveling all alone. And then one can understand the mental exhaustion was because of the obstacles and the dangers. So here he uses the word Indriya Atmaham. So Atma he uses to say that to refer to his mind. So he was not. So one must not think that he was spiritually tired, but Atma, as we have discussed in the past, can refer to the body, the mind, the soul, the super soul, the senses. So here it is more towards the mind. So he's sharing with Srila Vyasadeva that all this traveling, going through the physical obstacles, tired him physically, and just traveling all alone, facing these potential dangers, it tired him mentally. So what does he do? He says that he takes a bath in what he calls as the Hridanadya. So Hridanadya is an interesting word. Hridanadya, Prabhupada translates as to a river lake. And we have to appreciate that uh, Narad Muni is not, um, so this is not a material conversation, this is a spiritual conversation. So everything that Narad Muni is sharing has some direct or derived import. And here he uses the word Hridanadya, which is significant. Uh, the nature of a river and a lake are to some extent opposite. So a river is a moving body of water, a water that is constantly flowing. The nature of a river is that it is always pure. That is why ascetics, the uh, the uh, the sannyasis, they have the kutirs next to the river, because the water is constantly flowing. It does not give any contamination an opportunity to build up. Even if there is contamination, by the force of the flowing water, the contamination gets uh, um, uh, flows into downstream and eventually wherever the river empties. So that's the nature of the river. It is pure and it is purifying. Now, the nature of a lake is to some extent opposite. So the lake, as we know, is an inland body of water, and it is stagnant. So it has the tendency to get contaminated, because if there is a contamination, it simply stays in the in the water. But the lake is also different from the river, that the water of the lake is very calm. The water of a river is very agitated because it is constantly flowing, but a lake is serene. So Narad here is pointing a a Hridanadya, a river lake. So presumably this is a river that becomes a lake. So not all rivers, they end into the sea or an ocean. There are some rivers that end in the land itself. So the water comes in and it goes into the ground. So it fills a body of lake and goes in. So, so Narad is talking about the fact that he was taking a bath in something that is at the confluence of these diverse qualities, that of purification and contamination, that of agitation and serenity. So these are the contradictory qualities that are there in the Hridanadya, and Narad was taking a bath in it. So material life is considered to be contaminating. Material life is considered to be agitating. And spiritual life is purifying and serene. So, so metaphorically, Narad is going through this transformation. And one can understand that it's also something that literally that happened, that because Narad says that he was both thirsty and hungry, he took bath in the Hridanadya and he drank water. So he says, by the contacting water, I got relief from my exhaustion. So the water of the Hridanadya gives Narad physical relief, but not the relief from the in the mind. So earlier on, he said that he was tired both bodily and mentally. So here he's specifically saying that the water gave him relief physically. He says, I got relief from my exhaustion. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he notes that this is somewhere in the middle of the purport. A traveling mendicant can meet the needs of the body, namely thirst and hunger, by the gifts of nature without being a beggar at the doors of the householders. The mendicant, therefore, does not go to the house of a householder to beg, but to enlighten him spiritually. So Srila Prabhupada gives another aspect of Narad sharing this to indicate that uh, the needs of a traveling mendicant are met by Krishna naturally. He does not have to endeavor separately for them. So when they go to the householders, they don't go there to take care of the needs because Krishna is already taking care of their needs. But they go there to enlighten them only spiritually. So there is a very poetic set of verses that Sukadev Goswami speaks in this regard. It comes later on in the second canto, second chapter, and where Sukadev Goswami, he talks about how Krishna is naturally providing one with all the basic needs of life. So the verses go like, I'll read the translation. Sukadev Goswami says, when there are ample earthly flats to lie on, what is the necessity of cots and beds? When one can use his own arms, what's the necessity of a pillow? When one can use the palms of his hands, what is the necessity of varieties of utensils? When there are ample coverings of the skins of trees, what is the necessity of clothings? Are there no torn clothings lying on the common road? Do the trees which exist for maintaining others no longer give alms in charity? Do the rivers being dried up no longer supply water to the thirsty? Are the caves of the mountains now closed? And above all, does the Almighty Lord not protect the fully surrendered souls? Why then do the learned sages go to flatter those who are intoxicated by hard-earned wealth? So Sukadeva Goswami talks about the, the, the minimalist approach for transcendentalists. That Krishna is providing everything. Through nature is providing, and as a person, he is providing one to the fully surrendered soul. So there is no need to go and flatter the persons who are materially intoxicated, unless, as Shiva Prabhupada mentions, that one goes there to enlighten them spiritually. So this is briefly talked about when Sutta Goswami was enlightening the sages about Sukadev Goswami. So he was saying that Sukadev Goswami, he goes to the house of the fortunate householder only for the duration that it takes to milk a cow, and that also only for the purpose of enlightening them. So because the grahasthas by nature, they're materially engrossed. So they have no time for making spiritual advancement. And also, charity is the most important of the swadharma of the grahastha. So the spiritualists take advantage of this. They know that the grahasthas are inclined to give in charity. So on the pretext of giving them an opportunity to give in charity, they go begging to the house of the grahasthas. And then while doing so, they also impart to them spiritual knowledge. Okay, so this is 14. We'll go to the next verse, 15. Any questions or comments on this? Okay, 1615. Tasmin nirmanjane aranye pipalapastashritaha atmanatmanam atmastham yathashrutam achintayam. After that, under the shadow of a banyan tree in an uninhabited forest, I began to meditate upon the super soul situated within, using my intelligence as I learned from liberated souls. So Narad, he is tired physically and mentally, and he took care of his physical exhaustion by taking bath and drinking some water from the Hridinadya. Now he is saying, how did he take care of his mental exhaustion? So, so this verse gives us a glimpse into the bona fide process of meditation. So he says that he sits in an uninhabited part of the forest. So an aspiring yogi is recommended to withdraw from general populace in order to reduce these kinds of interference. Now, Narad is in a dense forest, and one can imagine that there are several kinds of trees. But yet, what does he take shelter of? He says, under the shadow of a banyan tree. So, the banyan tree is one that has frequent mentions in various scriptures. Does anybody remember where the banyan tree is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita?
Chapter 15, Prabhu.
Chapter 15. Thank you, Sharan Prabhu. So there Krishna compares the material world to an inverted banyan tree because of its excessive entanglements. But Narad is still taking shelter of the banyan tree, indicating that a devotee is not at all impacted by all these material entanglements because they are under the superior energy of Krishna. So when we looked at a banyan tree and say that this is the material world, and Krishna says that it has so many roots and so many branches and so many, which represents so many desires, so many objects of the senses. One should cut it down. But for a devotee, no problem. Why? Because they are protected by the superior energy of Krishna. So the devotees are not impacted by the agitation of the rivers. They are not impacted by the contamination of the lakes, and they're not impacted by the entanglement of the banyan trees. The banyan tree also has a special place in Puranic literature. We see that in the bewilderment of Markandeya Rishi. So when Markandeya Rishi asked for this benediction that show me the illusory energy of Krishna, then he sees the whole material world being inundated by the waters of destruction. And then how does Krishna appear? So Krishna appears as a small child floating on a banyan leaf, and he's sucking on his own toes. Then women also, they worship the banyan tree, especially on Saturdays. When you see banyan tree, especially in India, you'll see that there are red threads that are tied around its trunk or around its branches. And these are tied by women when they worship the banyan tree on Saturdays, because it is accepted that Lakshmi Devi, she resides in the banyan trees on these days, on Saturdays. Then in the Ramayana, Sita Devi, when she was kidnapped by Ravan and put into the Ashok Vatika, she took shelter of the banyan tree. And in temples, this is more so in the south, in temples, in the courtyard, they will generally have a banyan tree for auspiciousness. And in fact, what they generally do is that they have a neem tree and a banyan tree side by side. So they consider, and at some point they marry the two trees. So the banyan tree is considered to be the father, and the neem tree is considered to be the mother. And upon their marriage, like parents, they protect the devotees. So they grow them side by side, and the temple and the devotees is under the protection of the banyan trees and the neem tree. So for these reasons, Narad he selects a banyan tree, and in the isolation of the jungle, he sits and he begins to meditate. So for his meditation, Sutta Goswami describes it poetically. He says, Atmana Atmanam Atmastham. 3 times he says, Atmana Atmanam Atmastham. So by intelligence, super soul, and the self. So he says, I begin to meditate, Atmana, upon the super soul, Atmanam, situated within me, Atmastham. So that's the nature of meditation. Atmana Atmanam Atmastham. That one uses the intelligence to meditate on the super soul that is situated within one's own self. How did he meditate? So Narad says that I began to meditate according to what I had been taught. So he says that Yatha Shrutam, as I had heard from them. Shruta, that Yatha Shrutam. Exactly, Yatha means as, exactly as I had heard from them. So Srila Prabhupada in the purport, he calls out this important aspect. He says that one should not meditate according to one's personal whims. One should know perfectly well from the authoritative sources of scriptures through the transparent media of a bona fide spiritual master, and by the proper use of one's trained intelligence for meditating upon the super soul dwelling within every living being. So Srila Prabhupada expands on these 3 Atmas. Right? He says that one should follow according to the instructions, and then he talks about these three Atmas. But important is Yatha Shrutam. The devotional service is executed as per the scriptures received through the instructions of the spiritual master. So that is one important point that Prabhupada makes. Second point he makes is that one needs to use one's intelligence to follow these instructions. So surrender does not mean blind following. So one does not surrender. So when surrender is spoken about or glorified, so one does not surrender one's intelligence, but one surrenders using one's intelligence. So sometimes we think that following means blind following. That simply we do word to word as has been said. But we see in the life of the acharyas, we see in the life of Srila Prabhupada, we see in the life of our gurus, senior devotees, that they absorb the essence. They understand the core instruction, and then they follow and they instruct others according to the Kaldesh Patra. That Srila Prabhupada meditated on the instructions of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur for a long time before he acted upon it. And then he acted upon it using a lot of being very adaptable, very flexible, while preserving the essence of the instructions. We see the same in the scriptures in the life of great devotees like Arjun, Bali Maharaj, Uddhav, that how they very scrupulously followed the instructions of Krishna, but understanding the essence. When Arjun captured Ashwathama, then Krishna purposefully gave him ambiguous instructions. But then Arjun, using his instructions, understood the essence of what Krishna wanted to do, and then he pleased Krishna by that. We see the similar case in in the case of Bali Maharaj, that his Guru Maharaj is giving certain instructions, but Bali Maharaj, he used his intelligence to understand what is the best thing to do and acted accordingly. So Prabhupada uses the term transparent media of the bona fide spiritual guru. So a bona fide guru has two qualities. He's connected to a bona fide disciplic succession, and he is practicing what he is preaching. So Prabhupada is, in the purport, talking about both the qualifications of a disciple and the qualification of a, a bona fide guru. So when he says transparent media, so the nature of a Prabhupada would use the example of eyeglasses. That eyeglasses are transparent, but they are still corrective. So if you just had eyeglasses made of plain glass, they may be transparent, but they're useless. Because if you have weak eyesight, they don't add any value. But the spiritual master is not only transparent, but corrective also. So, so Narad was initiated into the Bhakti Marg by the Bhakti Vedantas, and from his heart he is absorbing and following the instructions. Now, the point that Srila Prabhupada also wants to make is that when we follow the process of bhakti, we are kind of steering away from the Pancharatrik Vidhi. The Pancharatrik Vidhi is full of stipulations. It is full of do's and don'ts. The Bhagavad Marg, it promotes a more spontaneous approach that is less subject to rules and regulations. But Prabhupada is saying that just because we are following the Bhagavad Marg, we should not use that as a license to act whimsically. In fact, in the Bhagavad Marg, it is more so important because there are intrinsically less regulations. It is more so important for us to understand those regulations and follow them. So in the purport, later on in the Bhagavatam, well, this is by the disciples of Prabhupada. In the for 1129, they quote Krishna as saying, Shruti Smriti Mamevagya Yaste Ulangaya Vartate Agyachedi Mam Dveshi Mad Bhaktu Pina Vaishnava. The Shruti and Smriti literatures are to be understood as my injunctions, and one who violates such codes is understood to be violating my will and thus opposing me. Although such a person may claim to be my devotee, he is not actually a Vaishnava. So Krishna is explicitly saying here that a Vaishnava is following the Bhagavad Marg, but that does not give them license to violate the injunctions of the Shruti and the Smriti. So they should not take shelter of the Bhagavad Vidhi and commit sinful activities. In fact, it is recommended that whatever the Shrutis and Smritis speak about Bhagavad Vidhi, they should scrupulously follow it. So Rupa Goswami in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says, Shruti Smriti Purnadi Pancharatrik Vidhim Vina Ekantir Harer Bhaktir Utpati Eva Kalpati. The devotional service to the Lord that ignores Shruti Smriti Purnadi Pancharatrik Vidhi. That means the authorized Vedic literature like the Shruti Smritis, Upanishads, Puranas, the Narad Pancharatras. What are they doing? They are Utpati Eva Kalpati. They are creating an unnecessary disturbance in the society. And the reason is that all these rules and regulations are there to help us. They are manifested directly by Krishna. So in the Bhagavatam 7th canto, 11th chapter, said that Dharmam Moolam Hi Bhagavan Sarvedam Vyo Hari Smritam Cha Tad Vidam Rajan Yenacha Atma Prasiddhi. that the Supreme Being, the personality of Godhead, is the essence of all Vedic knowledge, the root of all religious principle, and the memory of great authorities. O King Yudhishthir, this principle of religion is to be understood as evidence. On the basis of this religious principle, everything is satisfied, including one's mind, body, one's mind, soul, and even one's body. And similar understanding is given in Bhagavad Gita in 15:15. Sarvasicham hridhi matanspriti jnanam apohanam cha vedesacha sarver ameva vredyo vedantakrit vedavid evacha. Where Krishna says that I am known by the Vedas, I am the knower of the Vedas, and I am the compiler of the Vedas. So the general understanding we have is that when we are following the Bhagavad Vidhi, we should not take shelter of the so-called spontaneity of the Bhagavad Vidhi to ignore the injunctions of the scriptures or to ignore the injunctions of the Bhagavad Vedi Marg itself. So there are two kinds of injunctions. One is the injunctions in the scriptures that prevent one from becoming impious. So one should not take shelter of bhakti to do sinful activities, thinking that I am a devotee, and one should not take shelter of bhakti to ignore the injunctions of the bhakti. So some people, when they take shelter of bhakti, they become, or they artificially come to the avadut platform. So avadut is when you are not bound by the rules and regulations of bhakti. Then people may naturally reach that; it's an advanced stage. But some people will artificially reach that platform, saying that I'm an avadut, which means that the four regulative principles do not apply to me. I don't have to follow I'm protected by bhakti, so I don't have to seek protection under the rules and regulations of the Vedas. Or they may become what are they called?
Complacent.
Say that again, please.
Complacent. They don't really follow it as strictly.
No, sahajyas. That's the word I was looking for. Or they may become sahajyas. So the sahajyas, they not only they ignore the material injunctions, they also ignore the spiritual injunctions. They will just act. They'll perform, like there are sahajyas who will do Ras Leela and say this is, we are immersed in Krishna Bhakti. So they perform, they have illicit sex. Some sages will intoxicate intoxicants and say that this is helping us make spiritual injunctions. Because whenever Krishna is asking us to take shelter of him, shelter of him means shelter of his instructions. So when Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that Sarvadharma Pratyaja Mamekam Sharanam Raj, just before that, what does he say? In 1865, he says, Man Manabhavad Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskar. So he's describing what does Mamekam Sharanam Raj mean. Mamekam Sharanam means Man Manabhavad Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskar. So that's how one takes shelter of Krishna. Does not mean that we do Sarvadharma Pratyaja and we stop over there. The Krishna says Sarvadharma Pratyaja, so I'm Sarvadharma Pratyaja. But no, he says Mam Ekam Sharanam Raj. And Mam Ekam Sharanam Raj is Man Manabhavad Madbhakto Madhyaji Mam Namaskaru. So the protection that Krishna offers, he says that Masucha, so the protection that he offers is to one who, after having rejected Swadharma, has taken complete shelter of Paradharma. Not to one who rejects both Swadharma and Paradharma. So this is a very important both. It's a preaching point that Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport, and it's also a point for our own introspection. That as practicing devotees, sometimes we think that we are practicing the Bhakti Marg. So Bhakti Marg is spontaneous, and too much of Vidhi is the niyamagraha. Niyamagraha might interfere. And as a result of that, we are neither there. We are neither in Swadharma nor in Paradharma. Okay, next verse, 16:16. Any questions, comments on this verse?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, yes, Prabhu, one question. The intelligence aspect. So, so you mentioned that we should like just like you were giving Arjuna's example that he used his intelligence, so similarly we should also basically use our intelligence, but our intelligence is also not purified, right? Like we know that our intelligence is also contaminated along with our mind and senses. So I mean, of course, and I'm not talking about generic when we hear one thing from from the guru. If we hear one thing, we have to collaborate with sadhu and shastra. But other than that, like you were giving, I think in one of your previous classes, you were giving example of an instruction from your spiritual master about whether to put your son in Gurukul. Like he mentioned, send him to Gurukul, and then it was difficult for you to be able to do that. So basically, you went back to him and told him. But and then he mentioned that it is not. It wasn't an instruction. It was like a guide, like a suggestion or something like that. So I'm talking about these those kind of scenarios. I'm not talking about who God is, or whether to do Bhagavad Gita or Pancharatra or those kind of things. But I'm talking about which can be corroborated by Sadhu and Shastra. But I'm talking about more specific or more detailed instructions from the spiritual master. Like how do we use our intelligence when we know that our intelligence is limited and contaminated?
Okay, thank you. It's a good question. I can draw a little bit from my personal experience in this. So you're right. It's a good point that when we are taking shelter of a spiritual master, when we're taking shelter of other devotees, then we take shelter using our intelligence, and using our intelligence we execute on the instructions or the recommendations that are given by them. So the absolute necessity of two things, of taking shelter of a living guru and having a close connection with him or his representative, is very important for these two reasons. Of course, our intelligence is there and it guides us for most of the time. It will guide us. The guru gives us some specific intelligence, some specific instructions, and then we try to do we try to do our best. But there is always scope for potential misunderstandings or ambiguity, which is why Srila Prabhupada emphasized on the need that one should be connected to a living guru. So sometimes disciples or sometimes people say that I'm connected to Swami such and such, who perhaps appeared 200 years ago or 500 years ago. I'm taking shelter of his instructions, which is all good and fine. But it's kind of like becoming a doctor by reading the books in a library. So all the knowledge to practice medical science is there in the books, but one can't really become a doctor by reading. One has to practice under close supervision. That's why little controversial, but but not so much that I would not speak on it, that the Ritvik branch is condemned for this reason. That at least different interpretations of Ritvik, but at least the way the current connotation in ISKCON is that they want to take shelter of Srila Prabhupada and not of anybody, not of anybody else. And they're violating this tenet that one has to take shelter of a living guru. So on superficially, it may seem nice, but they have so much faith in Srila Prabhupada that they only want to take shelter of Srila Prabhupada. But if you take shelter of Srila Prabhupada, you take shelter of his instructions, and his instruction is that you should have shelter of a living guru. From a more experiential platform, you take shelter of Srila Prabhupada, and Srila Prabhupada is not there to guide you on a day-to-day basis. He is not there to chastise you for everything that you do wrong. His instructions are there, and Prabhupada has given so many instructions, you can pick and choose whichever ones you want. He has given instructions on that are seemingly contradictory on the same topic. And of course, they have context that justify the contradiction, but then it's up to you, depending on what you want to do. Say, today I feel like this, so I pick this Prabhupada instruction, and I pick that one. Prabhupada is not there to chastise you. So that's why important to have shelter of a living guru. And the second part is to stay in close contact, so that this feedback loop is constant and uninterrupted. Because going back a little bit to our previous discussion, that bhakti is Vigyan. So it is the practical implementation of theoretical knowledge. And theoretical knowledge, we can open a book, we can sit in a quiet place and study it, but when we are practically doing it. So for those of you who have a science background, when you did the labs, you were very closely working with the person who's guiding you in the lab. So that whatever the experiment we are doing comes out okay. So similarly, when we are practically executing bhakti, we have to be closely linked with it. And that is one of the things that I can speak about my Guru Maharaj, that at least earlier on when he is giving shelter, he is very particular about this need to be in constant touch. He has a very busy schedule, but he will respond to emails right away. He will call when needed. I remember this is many years ago. I remember I sent him so I'll not go into the details because it will be embarrassing to me, but I sent him an email once about something, and late in the evening, and within a matter of an hour, Maharaj called me himself. He had another senior devotee call me, and he had a godbrother of his call me. Because the question that I asked, and he has more understanding than I do, but it was, it was something that he was concerned was a possible deviation from Prabhupada's teachings. And when he read the email, he was concerned. So within an hour, I had 3 calls from my Guru Maharaj, from a godbrother of my Guru Maharaj, and from a senior godbrother of mine. So that's the protection that you get when you surrender with your intelligence.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah, just want to add, you remember when we did this verse, Srimad 1:521, in the purport, Prabhupada said that even Lord Krishna, Lord Ram, Lord Chaitanya, they all accepted the formal spiritual master. That means Prabhupada, in his own word, he's saying that, we should have formal spiritual master. This can be something that we can use to defeat the Rigvik, this purport of this verse.
Yeah, you're right. Now, the Ritvik philosophy. So we don't want to make this a Ritvik discussion. The Ritvik is a valid philosophy. the Ritviks did not come up with the word Ritvik. It's a valid form of taking shelter. The implementation, of course, is incorrect. A lot depends on the spirit behind the implementation. But these simple things are there that Prabhupada says that Krishna took shelter of Sandipani Muni. Lord Ram took shelter of Vishwamitra. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he took shelter of Kesha Bharati. And they're all, they're all personalities of Godhead taking shelter. So they're instructing by example. So thank you. It's a good point, Prabhu.
It sounds like it sounds like what you're saying is basically we should, like, if there is ambiguity, we go to a spiritual master to clarify. But I'm not sure whether I'm clear about whether we should use intelligence or not. Like,
so your question is when do we go to the spiritual masters to clarify?
Like you're saying that we should have a living spiritual master, the living person to guide us, whether it is spiritual master or whether an advanced devotee. So basically, should we not use our intelligence? I mean, of course, we use our intelligence to do to execution of the service that we've got, but and is that the only time that we use our intelligence, and not when we when do we use?
So we use our intelligence to understand and execute the instructions. There's a so in Shikshamrita it's funny also, but it's instructive, that there's a disciple of Prabhupada who's writing letters. So she's obviously very sincere in a desire to take care of Tulsi Devi. So she's writing letters, all these letters to Srila Prabhupada, that sunlight, how much water, what to do, and Prabhupada is patiently answering him. And then she writes, then she starts asking very, very specific questions. Should I do this? Should I do that? And then Prabhupada writes in a letter, replies to the letter, says that in order, I'm paraphrasing, but he says that in order for all this to be done, please use your common sense. If you don't have any common sense, you find somebody who has and take advantage of that person's common sense. So of course we have to use that. The point is, Prabhupada is saying that have some common sense, have some intelligence, and use that intelligence to best understand and execute the instructions. So we don't become like robots, or we don't become devoid of intelligence. We say that should we sit down, Guru Maharaj? Should we stand up now? You have asked us to do Aarti at 8 o'clock in the morning. So I'll do Aarti at 8 o'clock in the morning, even if I am up until 6 a.m. the previous night, or even if there is somebody sick in my house. So that's where common sense comes in. That's where intelligence comes in, that we apply the instructions in order to achieve the intended goal behind the instructions. And the intelligence also comes, going back to the example that I had shared with you. It also comes in making this distinction between the instruction and the intent behind the instruction. So in my particular conversation, Maharaj said that that when I speak, I give a lot of generalized instructions, which have to be mostly followed. He says that, like when I say that you must chant sincerely, yes, you should try to chant sincerely. When I said that you should read Prabhupada's books, they're generalized instructions. They are there that I would give in a Sunday feast lecture. I would give in a generalized setting. They're for you, they're for everyone, and they have to be followed. And when I talk to you, I've shared things with you that are specifically meant for you. And because they're coming from me, you should deal with them with gravity. You should think about it, and to the best of your ability, try to follow them. And then there's this third category. He says that I give as instructions, and says the instructions you should, your spiritual life depends on you. You should follow them. So that's where, that's where he, the sense I got was that's how we use our intelligence. That we understand the generalized instructions, follow them to the best of our abilities. We understand the specific instruction, guidance, and then we understand the instruction that he has given. Srila Prabhupada once he told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, you go to China and preach. And initially Tamal Krishna Maharaj, he thought that he was talking in a general. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, okay, but then he starts saying that at China, it's not really possible. It's a communist country. And then Prabhupada said, I want you to go to China and preach. And then Tamal Krishna Maharaj understood that this is an instruction that is coming from Prabhupada. So he went to China and he tried to preach over there. Okay, does that help, Achyuta?
Yes, Prabhu, yes, thank you.
Okay, so we'll do 1616. Dhyayata charanabhujam bhava nirjit chetasha akunta akhantatyasharu kalakasya hridayashin me shaner hari. As soon as I began to meditate upon the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, with my mind transformed in transcendental love, tears rolled down my eyes. And without delay, the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, appeared on the lotus of my heart. So this is an important moment in the life of Narad Muni. He is describing his first encounter with Krishna. So what does he say? Shane. Shana means quickly. As soon as he began to meditate, and he's meditating on Krishna, or he's saying Charanambhujam. So he's meditating on the lotus feet of Krishna. So what happens after that? Hari, Krishna, appeared within his heart. So Narad Muni uses the word Shane to indicate that he did not have to meditate for a long time. This is not the process of Astanga Yoga that he's talking about. So one may think about meditation, and yogis have to meditate millions and millions of years before they even get the glimpse of the effulgence of the toenails of Krishna. That's not what Narad is doing. One should not confuse Narad's process to be that of Astanga Yoga. So he's saying Shane. So the boy of 5 years old sitting there meditating, and Shane, as soon as he meditates, what happens? Bhava nirjita. Bhava nirjita means that nirjita is transformed. That because of this transcendental bhav, because of this transcendental love of Krishna, his mind is transformed, and the other thing that comes is akantaya, eagerness. So this eagerness for association with Krishna.
I think somebody is muted. Can everybody mute? Thanks.
Okay, thank you. So this is the impact of Krishna Sparsha. So our direct contact with Krishna, that Narad says that I experienced Bhava Bhakti, which is spontaneous appearance of tears. So if you remember that in the first canto, second chapter, Sutta Goswami, in answering the questions of the sages, he talks about the progression of bhakti from Shraddha to Prema. And in the previous chapter, first canto, fifth chapter, Narad Muni has used his own life to describe the progression of bhakti. He uses his own life as an example, beginning with sadhu sang, beginning with the association of the devotees onto further sages. So in the purport to this verse, Srila Prabhupada again describes the process of progression of bhakti from Shraddha to Prem. I'm sorry, not in the purport to this verse, but in the purport to the previous chapter, 1534 actually. Prabhupada describes the progression of um, um, bhakti. So, and later on we'll see he will once again in 1636 he will again describe the progression of different stages of bhakti. So, and the reason Prabhupada does that, we'll see that as we go. Prabhupada, he often takes this opportunity to describe progression through the stages of bhakti, and it's kind of um, I'll give you an example that over this holiday period, we went on a trip. So I generally don't drive, but my son convinced me. So we went to we drove to a place close by, and with all this GPS technology, there is the GPS giving us the route, and as we are driving, we keep checking on the GPS that okay, I'm 100 miles away, and I've crossed this landmark, and now I'm 50 miles away. I've crossed this landmark. So it does two things. It assures us that we are on the right path, and it encourages us that we are making progress. So that's what Prabhupada is doing. That's what Krishna is doing. That frequently, either through the life of his devotees or through instructions, they will tell us about the progression of bhakti through preliminary to advanced stages. Prabhupada will also talk about it in the purport for these two reasons. That with the assumption that the people who are reading are practicing devotees, so they see the path that's being charted on which they're traveling. That yes, I'm now at the stage of anartha nivritti, or I'm at the stage of ruchi, or whichever stage that they are. That yes, I feel validated. That whatever the symptoms are being described, I get a glimpse of those symptoms, or maybe I see them in somebody else, and I know that I'm in proper association. So Narad Muni at this stage is experiencing bhava bhakti because of the Krishna sparsha, because he sees Krishna, personal association of Krishna. He is experiencing bhava bhakti, which is very difficult to attain. We know in the progression of bhakti, it comes after anartha nivritti, nishthayan, and ruchi. Is experiencing bhava bhakti, and one of the symptoms of bhava bhakti is bodily transformation. Specifically, they are known as ashtasattvic bhava. So the ashtasattvic bhavas are eight, which is paralysis, tears, perspiration, change of color, fainting, horripilation, trembling, and stammering. Self-explanatory. Horripilation is hair standing on an end, and change of color is people become white in color, or they become flush with. So these are involuntary symptoms. There is a separate. I won't go through it. There is a separate analysis on. So somebody might ask that why does a spiritual experience result in material symptoms? Because each of these symptoms can be produced materially also. Your tears, you're angry, you have tears. You're sad, you have tears. Somebody has lost a lot of money in the stock market, they have tears, right? So how can that be considered to be a symptom of bhava bhakti? So there's a separate analysis done by Thakur Bhakti Vinod on this, and he does the analysis both to assure those who are experiencing genuine ashtasattvic and to protect from those who are producing artificial, the sages who are producing artificial ashtasattvic. But sufficient for us to understand that Narad Muni is in the genuine criteria. That he is genuinely the at least one of the symptoms that he is displaying, which is tears. This is a genuine symptom of Bhava Bhakti. He is alone in the forest with no audience. There's no need for him to put on a show. He is doing it because of Krishna Sparsha, because he has been fortunate enough to get direct audience of Krishna. Okay, we'll do the next verse. Any questions, comments on this?
Really, I always feel like, I mean, it's been so many years, but I always feel like I still haven't crossed the stage of Ado Shraddha. And I don't know if there are like any, I mean, of course, there are no external symptoms for like Ado Shraddha, Sadhu Sangha, Bhajana Kriya, Anartha Nivritti, but I'm just wondering, like, so that's why I always fear, like, reading other, even if somebody sends me something else from another guru or something like that, like something to read, even if it is like a fun paragraph thing, I like avoid reading it because I'm just like fearful of my bhakti creeper and want to protect it. So I'm not like I mean, even though we keep like hearing about this, that we should assess and see where like see our progress, and you could check our progression and see where we are at. Like I just feel like I haven't progressed, like in so many years also.
So there's well, firstly, it's something that I would endorse, that we take shelter from within the parampara, and within the parampara we take shelter of Swajati. So we take shelter of those who are with a similar conception. So that's important. That it's not that there are no bona fide devotees outside ISKCON. It's not that there is no bona fide literature outside the books written by Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada would not subscribe to that notion himself, but yet Srila Prabhupada would say that you read my books. And the reason is because when we are weak, then we take exclusive shelter, because we lack the ability to discriminate. In fact, further narrowing on that, even within ISKCON, we take more shelter of a spiritual master. It doesn't mean that the other gurus are not qualified or are not at the same level. It's obviously blasphemous to think that, but yet we take shelter of our spiritual master, because that's where we have the most protection. So it kind of relates, Achyuta, to the question that you asked earlier on about intelligence. That's where we use our intelligence. That somebody comes to you and says, let's go. There is a very good sadhu from Vrindavan who's coming and giving a lecture, and and we say no, not because we're disrespectful to the sadhu, not because we think that we're more elevated to the sadhu, but because we know that our bhakti lata is still weak, and then it needs this shelter. In terms of symptoms, the nature of when we do anything, there are always symptoms that are produced. When we take to spirituality, the first symptom of it is material detachment. It may not be complete, but it is commensurate. That there is some level of material detachment. We tend to be less preoccupied with the material conception of life. That is a strong symptom. Maybe later on there is more taste in spirituality. Then as we will see later on in these verses, maybe either today or next week, the hankering the hankering that comes for more. It's like you were saying, and we say that to ourselves. Are we making sufficient progress? Are we there yet? Right, that's that hankering. That there is a pot of gold that I know, and we are slowly but surely heading towards it. But how far away are we? So these are all manifest symptoms. Bhakti does not necessarily have to manifest in terms of mystic abilities. It does not have to necessarily manifest as Ashtasattvic bhav. Does not have to necessarily manifest as getting a body like Brahma. All these are byproducts. May happen, may not happen. But what it does manifest as is attachment to Krishna and his devotees, and detachment from the material energy. Okay.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Okay, so we'll do 1617. Premati bhar nirbhinna pulakana tinvrataha anad samplavelina napasham ubayam mune. O Vasudev, at that time, being exceedingly overpowered by feelings of happiness, every part of my body became separately enlivened. Being absorbed in an ocean of ecstasy, I could not see both myself and the Lord. So if you read the verse, there seems to be an apparent contradiction in nirbhinna. So nirbhinna means, he says, bhinna means separate, nirbhin means merged. So he's saying nirbhin, and then he's saying na apasyam ubhayam. So nirbhin is Prabhupada translates nirbhin as every part of the body separately, and na pashyam ubhayam he translates as could not see both. So when you read the words, you think, which one is it? Is it nirbhin, which means that he could see every part separately, or is it na pasyam ubhayam, that could not see both? And Prabhupada addresses this in his purport. He says that we can just have a glimpse of such ecstasy in the words of Sri Narad Muni. Each and every part of the body or senses has this particular function. After seeing the Lord, all the senses became fully awakened to render service unto the Lord, because in the liberated state, the senses are fully efficient in serving the Lord. As such, in that transcendental ecstasy, it so happened that the senses become separately enlivened to serve the Lord. So Narad Muni qualifies this na pashyam ubhayam, could not see both, with anand samplave lina, that absorbed in the ocean of ecstasy. So seeing the Lord fully satisfied Narad, and each of his senses focused upon the Lord in the heart. So each senses was fully awakened. So that is the part where he's saying nirbhinna, that everything became separate. But each of this separate part became fully merged in the intense desire to serve Krishna. So that's why he says the word na apashyam ubhayam, that he could not see the difference. So this is not Narad Muni merging into Krishna. So one should not take this phrase na pashyam ubhayam to say that when he saw Krishna, he merged into Krishna. So that's what Narad Muni is saying nirbhinna, that he was saying that each of his senses was separately enlivened. So if the senses are separately enlivened, there's no question of merging. But yet they were merged. They were merged in the strong desire to serve Krishna. So when you have a flower that is very, very fragrant, so when you have a flower that is very, very fragrant, and then you smell it intensely, then the sense of smell is heightened. But that sense of smell becomes merged with the fragrance of the flower. So in the same way, and this is just one sense that we are talking about. So in the same way, Narad Muni is now talking about each and every of his sense. So he's talking about the experience of a devotee at the stage of Bhava Bhakti. That every sense is separately enlivened. Every sense is heightened. And it is heightened because of its intense desire to serve Krishna. It is heightened because of its proximity to Krishna and its desire to serve Krishna. So this is nice. This is nice. What is it called? It is called. So there's so in English literature there's like you have metaphors and allitrations and similes. There is a particular figure of speech that is used to describe this kind of emotions, that they use contradiction to bring forth a point. So Narad Muni uses that he's using simultaneous contradiction, that separately enlivened yet merged, that each senses is separately enlivened, but it is merged in the desire to serve Krishna. So in the verse we see that Narad Muni is addressing Srila Vyasadeva as Muni. He says that Na Pashyam Ubhayam Mune. Muni, and Prabhupada translates this as O Vyasadeva, because he's addressing Srila Vyasadeva. And Prabhupada earlier on had said that a Muni is one who agitates his mind, mana, to speculate on philosophy. And a Muni is also one who is Mauni. Mauni is one who is grave. So these exalted symptoms of bhakti that Narad Muni has talked about, it cannot be understood by the Munis who speculate with their minds, but it can be accepted by the Munis who are grave, who do not speculate but introspect. So a little bit of play on words. Srila Vyasadeva, through his Karam-Kand part of the Vedas, he has encouraged mental speculation. But Srila Vyasadeva is a devotee himself and well qualified to understand these ecstatic symptoms of bhakti. So Narad uses the word Muni to play upon both these aspects. That through his literature, Srila Vyasadeva has encouraged mental speculation, especially through the Jnana-Kand. He has encouraged mental speculation, but yet Narad Muni is sharing these very, very intimate transcendental symptoms, because Vyasadeva is the other kind of Muni, the Maunya kind of Muni. Okay, next verse. Questions, comments on this? Rupam bhagavato yattan manakantam sushapaham apashyam sahoshatse vaiklavaya durmanaiva. The transcendental form of the Lord as it is satisfied the mind's desire and at once erases all mental incongruities. Upon losing that form, I suddenly got up, being perturbed, as is usual when one loses that which is desirable. So in the previous word, Narad had commented that seeing the form of Lord in his heart, it had filled him with atibhara prema. So ati is used to indicate excessive. And he says, Ati Bhara Prema, excessive love. And Ananda Samplavalina, it had absorbed him in the ocean of ecstasy. Now in this verse, he says that he loses that form. And once he loses that form, he becomes Vaiklavayat. Vaiklavayat means very perturbed. So one may question that, I read this and I say, yeah, I can relate to that. When I get something, I'm happy. And when I lose something, I become agitated or perturbed. So the nature of love and happiness that we experience in the material world is that it increases one's desires. When we are experiencing material love or material happiness, they don't satisfy us. They increases one's desires, and more importantly, they increases one's sense of duality. The duality between me and, so I'm experiencing happiness. This is for the satisfaction of my desires. But Narad is making this distinction now. He's trying to say that one should not think that what I experienced was material. That I was happy when I got something and I got perturbed when I lost something. He's now trying to show that it is different. So he's saying that what I experienced resulted in manakantam. So manakantam means is full satisfaction of the mind's desires, and sucha apaham, that it erased all mental disparities. So what he was experiencing was spiritual, not material. If it was material, then it would not have resulted in manakantam. It would have resulted in mana akantam, because the nature of material engagement is that it increases one's desires. It would not result in sucha apaham, because it increases the duality. So Nad Muni is using this phrase to show that his experience was not material. So this duality that he is showing, that he was happy when he got Krishna and he's perturbed when he lost Krishna, it is not material. It is spiritual, because it is from and at this stage he's showing it symptomatically, because it resulted in manakantam and sucha apaham. So Prabhupada in the purport, he says, for the whole duration of a life, we go on seeing different forms in the material world, but none of them is just apt to satisfy the mind, nor can any one of them vanish all perturbance of the mind. These are special features of the transcendental form of the Lord. And one who has seen that form is not satisfied with anything else. No form in the material world can any longer satisfy the seer. So that is the source of the perturbation of Narad Muni, the lolium, the greed for continued spiritual satisfaction, not material deprivation. So Narad continues to describe what happens to him. So earlier on he had said, Na pashyam ubhayam, that I could not see both separately. Meaning the point we made that he could not see, they were merged in service. So now he again says, he uses the word apashyan in a different context. Now he could actually not see the Lord. Earlier on he could not see the Lord because he was so closely associated with the Lord in the mood of service. Now apashyan is in a different context. That I could not see the Lord because Krishna actually went out of his vision. So just as the Lord had appeared in his heart, so he had said, Hridyashin me shaner hari, that without delay, the Lord appeared in my heart. And now he says, Sahasa, all of a sudden, he disappeared. So both the appearance and the disappearance of Krishna, at least in this context, with Narad Muni, they they happened Shanehe Sahasa. All of a sudden Krishna appeared, all of a sudden Krishna disappeared. What was the impact on Narad? Uthaste. That he got up. Vaiklavyat. He became perturbed. And why? So Narad Muni justifies it. He says, why did he become Vaiklavya? Why did he Utastya? So he was sitting down under the tree for meditation. Now he is Utastya. So we have that Utasto Tisto Partha. He's saying, get up. Krishna is saying, get up, Partha. Same Utasta. He got up abruptly because Durmana Iva. That he lost something that was very desirable for him. So when Krishna suddenly disappeared, Narad becomes very disturbed. And then shocked almost to madness, he leapt up once again in agitation. Srila Prabhupada says that when we all desire life after life, what we all desired life after life was obtained by Narad Muni. And losing sight of him again was a great shock for him. So we'll stop at this point. I went a little bit over my 15 minutes mark. And we will resume next week from 1619. So if you have any comments or points for discussion, we can have some discussion for the next 10 minutes or so.
In the previous verse, so like Narad Muni actually saw, he was, we saw the transcendental ecstasies in his, we saw Ashtasatvika Bhava and all those things. And then in this verse, we are seeing that, he, when Krishna disappeared, how he, he was,
agitated.
He was agitated, yeah. So isn't even the appearance and the disappearance also like duality, in the sense that it seems like our duality, when we go to the temple, we see the form of the Lord, and then when we are when we go back home, when we come back home, it's we the form, we are away from the Lord, from the temple.
Yes.
So but how is, why was, but Narad Muni was purified already, so why was the disappearance of the Lord so agitating for him?
Yes,
because
yes,
he's already seeing.
It's a good question, and it's something that's a good segue for the discussion next week. That why did Narad Muni get agitated? Right? He was purified enough to have Krishna Sparsha, which means that he should accept. He should be away from the dualities. We'll discuss this more so next week, but just 2 points. One is that Narad Muni was actually not purified. That's why. And the second is that becoming spiritual becoming free of dualities does not mean becoming free of emotions. Even the devotees, like you were saying, you feel happy when you're in the presence of the deities, and not so happy when you're away from the deities. That we want to be like that. And we want to be happy when there is kirtan going on. We want to be happy when we are in association of devotees. We don't want to become like the Brahmavadis, where everything is Om Shanti Shanti. That's not our program. So the duality that Narad Muni is experiencing is not material duality. It's not even spiritual dualities. It is just the waves of spiritual emotions that the devotees feel. They're happy when they're in the association of devotees. They're unhappy when they lose that association. That sometimes when Vaishnavas pass away, then even though the devotees know the science, that this is just the body and the soul is eternal, and when the Vaishnavas pass away, they've gone to a better place, but they still lament. They still lament because of the spiritual attachment. The vapu is gone, the personal association with the devotee is gone, the opportunity to serve the devotee is not there. So then there is lamentation because of that. So both of these are there in Narada Muni's case. That one, and both of these points will be made later on. That one, yes, that Narada Muni's bhakti was still not there. It was still immature. And second is that spiritual advancements does not mean that one becomes stoic. In fact, one may become stoic to material dualities, but one is still very, very sentient to one's spiritual existence.
So there is such a thing as spiritual dualities. Is that what you're saying?
So yes, but the duality has a different connotation. The material duality has the nature of agitating us. That when we look at happiness and distress, then it agitates our mind. That we seek happiness, we avoid distress. Spiritual duality is that whether we are happy or distressed, we are attracted to Krishna. So we use the term duality because of its proximity to what we see in the material conception. So it does not agitate us in that way, but everything that is material has spiritual roots. So the happiness and distress, the anger, the lust, the greed, everything comes. They're all spiritual emotions. Everything that is material, it has a spiritual root. And being personalists, it's important for us to acknowledge that. So our program is not to become what's the opposite? Our program is not to become monists. That we're completely devoid of any kinds of emotions. But our program is that everything that we experience is connected to Krishna and his devotees.
Hare Krishna Prabhu. Very nice class. Thank you very much. This is Nandagopal Das. Prabhu, I have this question. Like when we say devotional service, it means there are two: a person who serves and the person who accepts the service. But here you are saying that in service he became one with the Lord. So how to understand this kind of I'm unable to capture that. Would you please elaborate on that?
Sure. Thank you, Prabhu. So I forget the reference that Prabhupada addresses this particular question by saying that the oneness is in purpose. So we become one in purpose, that we are unified with Krishna in the mood of the strong desire to serve him. So this particular verse also it brings forth that when Narad Muni says a nirvin, when all his senses were separately enlivened in close contact with Krishna, he could not see the difference between himself and Krishna, because they were united in the mood of in the mood of service. Now, unfortunately, I cannot give any anecdotal example for this, because this is an exalted stage that we can kind of study and see as something that is that is kind of like a cool. When I was reading this, the question that you asked actually came to my mind also, and I was trying to think of, and I would invite all of you to maybe help me out over here, to think that do we have any experiential examples of this? Are there any times when we are so much absorbed in service that we are unable to see the distinction between um, between between us and the object of our service? Now, I could not, but that's what the verse talks about. That's what Srila Prabhupada explains. So so. Um, so not to say that the answer is not there. The answer is what is given by Prabhupada, but to elaborate further on it, again, I would invite all of you to maybe think about it. Next class we can have some discussion, and somebody can share their experiences, either personal experiences or somebody's experiences that have been shared with them, where they had this experience of oneness with because Krishna is Ashraya. He's the shelter. He's the shelter for the services, right? He is the object. He's the object of our love. He is the object of our service. But at what point do they become so close to one another that they appear to merge?
So as you are elaborating on that, it just occurs to me, but correct me if I am wrong. The oneness is also when we do the service. It's not my state. I'm talking about here in this particular context. A person becomes so ecstatic that this ecstasy is same as what Krishna's ecstasy is, in oneness of the ecstasy with Krishna. Or in other words, it is same as what Krishna experiences, this person is experiencing as a happiness or bliss or ecstasy. So is that the right thing to understand?
Sounds reasonable. Just to expand on the point you were making, I was thinking of in Vrindavan, we see when the gopis or when Yashodama is serving Krishna, she's fully absorbed in the service and in Krishna, and at that time all she's thinking about is Krishna's pastimes. She's singing about Krishna's glories. In her mind, she's thinking about Krishna. So then that absorption gets her very, very close to Krishna. Srimati Radharani, this is more in the service in the mood of separation. When she's thinking about Krishna, she assumes a bodily luster like Krishna. So that is even higher, that she actually begins to look like Krishna. She becomes bluish in color. So you're right. This is one possible understanding of that from the lives of the more advanced devotees.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Gaur Sundar Das here. Please accept my humble obeisances. It just occurred to me the verse that you spoke previously, 1:6:14. You mentioned about the Hridanadya, where the intersection of the lake with the river. So I was trying to put that in this context, where we are trying to understand the merging, the apparent merging. So if you see the intersection of a river into an ocean, or where a small water body meets a large water body, if you go underneath and try to see the intersection point, you cannot see that. But the small water body is kind of merging into the large water body, but it appears to be similar when you go down. It's all the same water, but actually it is separate. So that was something close that I could think of with my little intelligence, Prabhu.
And it's a nice visual example. I like the way you presented it also. That a river merging into the ocean, and there is distinction, but there is the commonality. There is the commonality also. And if you extrapolate it, there is the merging of the desires. The jiva's desires are completely aligned with Krishna's desires. So there is that merging, but then there is also the individuality. The jiva always stays distinct from Krishna. So very very the sense I get is that the Srimad Bhagavatam itself is an ocean, and then we are like really really small water bodies trying to merge into the Bhagavatam. Appreciate the the infinite nectar that Krishna and Srila Vyasadeva have made available to us. The Srila Prabhupada has very very kindly presented to us. We can get a sense now that why acharyas like Bhakti Siddhanta and the six Goswamis, they could for months and months meditate on a single verse, or they could meditate on a single phrase in the verse. So when we look at the verse, we read it and we say, okay, this is what it is. But then as we look more and more deeper, we look deeper into the word choices, we look deeper into the juxtaposition of the phrases. What we're doing right now is scratching the surface of the surface. But there is so much when two such great personalities are talking to one another, Srila Vyasadeva and Srila Narad Muni, and when it is presented to us by Sukadev Goswami, Sutta Goswami, Srila Prabhupada, you can imagine the amount of nectar that's been packed into it. So it gives us a sense of humility also, that we are the small fireflies that are trying to appreciate the sunlight. But the fact that we are able to get something of it also gives us a sense of a good fortune, that Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada has made it available for us.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Sharan Prabhu.
Yeah, I just want to make a comment on what Gurasundar Prabhu said about the river merging to the ocean. In the Nectar of Devotion, we did that Rupa Goswami explained that the river merge, but the devotee, the soul, is like fish that keep the individuality when they merge into the sea.
Right.
This is what he said.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that point.
Hello?
Yes?
Oh, Hare Krishna. Regarding oneness, I was reflecting Upanishad 7. It says, one who always is all living entities and spiritual sparks, whose quality one with the Lord, becomes a true mirror of things. Like oneness refers to quality one with the Lord. And the purport says, the real center of enjoyment is the Supreme Lord, who is the center of the sublime and spiritual resort, and we are all meant to join him and enjoy life with one transcendental interest and without any clash. That is the highest platform of spiritual interest, and as soon as one realizes this perfect form of oneness, there can be no question of illusion or lamentation. I just want to share this.
That's very nice.
Oneness refers to one transcendental interest.
Yeah. Thank you, Madhuri. Which verse of the Upanishad is this? Ekatvam, verse 7. Okay. Thank you. I will definitely read upon it, because this seems to be resonating with exactly the point that Srila Prabhupada makes in the purport of this verse. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. Okay, so if there are no more questions or comments, we'll end over here. Vancha kalpatarubhayascha kripa sindhubhyev cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta koti vaishnavrinda ki jai. Radha ki jai. Jai Gaur Premanand Hare Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.